Nicole Caro was in the restroom. Suddenly, a pair of leather shoes appeared under the door crack. She thought a man had mistakenly entered the women's restroom. Just as she was about to warn him, the person on the other side began rattling the door violently, clearly trying to break in. Terrified, she whispered pleas for mercy. Fortunately, a moment later, the footsteps faded away. Only then did she cautiously open the door. She looked around and found no one there. Finally, she breathed a sigh of relief. Alright, horror fans, I'm back with my friends. Today, we continue with the classic horror film, Rest Stop. The protagonist, Nicole Caro, after a huge fight with her mother, decided to elope with her boyfriend, Jess. They packed their bags and headed straight for Los Angeles, planning to make a name for themselves in Hollywood. Not long after they set off, Jess suddenly got an idea to shoot a short film to hone his acting skills. They immediately agreed and drove their car into a small grove by the roadside and began filming their scene. After some intimate moments, they got back in the car to continue their journey. Just then, a pickup truck suddenly sped towards them. Jess reacted quickly, sharply turning the steering wheel, barely avoiding a collision. Furious, Jess jumped out of the car, shouting obscenities. The killer, however, paid no mind. He floored the accelerator and sped off. What a considerate driver, right? Nicole and Jess could only suppress their anger and continue their journey. Along the way, Nicole suddenly had to use the restroom, so Jess pulled the car over next to a public restroom. But the moment Nicole Caro stepped inside, she frowned. The place was covered in grime and utterly dilapidated. She had to suppress her disgust and take care of her business. As she turned to leave, she suddenly heard a strange rustling sound coming from behind the iron door next to her. She thought it was a mouse and didn't think much of it. Stepping out of the restroom, she found Jess was nowhere to be seen. A wave of panic washed over her. She thought her boyfriend had abandoned her, so she hastily pulled out her phone to make a call, only to find there was no signal at all. And the public phone next to her didn't even have a phone line. That's when she noticed the walls were plastered with missing person posters. From yellowed, faded old papers to fresh new ones, layered upon layered, showing traces of several decades. This place felt more like a human trafficking den. Nicole Caro was so scared that her whole body trembled. She ran to the nearby RV and knocked on the door. But no one answered, even after she knocked for a long time. As dusk began to settle, Nicole Caro had no choice but to brave the highway and flag down a car for help. But the vehicle that approached was none other than the killer's pickup truck. The killer didn't slow down when he saw her. Instead, he slammed on the gas and sped straight towards her. Seeing Nicole Caro dodge out of the way, the pickup truck performed a sharp drift, then dropped a cell phone and drove off nonchalantly. Nicole Caro picked it up and saw that it was Jess phone. Connecting this to the missing persons posters on the wall, she feared that Jess was already in grave danger. Suddenly, Nicole Caro remembered something. The pickup truck's license plate seemed familiar. She had seen it before, scrawled inside a toilet stall. Nicole Caro rushed back to the restroom like a mad woman. Sure enough, on the stall wall, she found a message. It read, "A driver killed my husband and cut me." Below it was a string of letters and numbers, which was precisely the pickup truck's license plate. Nicole Caro finally realized that the killer was a psychopathic murderer, and he had been targeting her all along. If she didn't escape soon, she would also become another name on a missing persons poster. She picked up a stone and violently smashed the glass of the nearby rest stop. She smashed the window and climbed out. The room inside was a complete mess. That's when she noticed a radio nearby. She quickly tuned the channel, desperate to call for help. But after shouting for quite some time, there was no response. She fought back tears, forcing herself to stay calm. She knew she couldn't just sit there and wait to die. She began to search the room for anything she could use as a weapon. After rummaging through every corner, she only found half a bottle of unfinished liquor. Then she noticed a television set in the corner. Clinging to a final shred of hope, she turned it on, hoping to find some useful information. The moment the screen flickered to life, she was utterly dumbfounded. The channel was playing a home video, and the stars of it were none other than herself and Jess Hiltz. That footage was only supposed to exist on their DV camera. Who could have put it on the television?
Call back Mayday. Got a copy? You hear me?
Hello? Hello? Help me, please?
Nicole Caro, clutching at this lifeline, desperately cried for help into the radio. However, the man was hundreds of miles away from her location and couldn't get there quickly. But thankfully, he could help her by calling the police. Nicole Caro thanked him profusely, then instinctively asked for his name.
What's your name?
Jesse.
It turned out to be her boyfriend's name. Nicole Caro paused for a moment, but she just assumed it was a coincidence of names. She didn't think much more about it. After hanging up the radio, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. She drank some alcohol while waiting for rescue. In the middle of the night, a car engine roaring woke her up. She thought rescue had arrived. She stumbled out, only to find Jess Hiltz's car parked outside. It was empty. Nicole Caro got into the car intending to leave. As she reached out, her hand brushed against a pool of fresh blood. Terrified, she frantically turned the key, but the car wouldn't start. Suddenly, a blinding light shone directly at her. It was the killer's pickup truck, now resembling a lurking beast. It charged fiercely towards her. Nicole Caro, having narrowly escaped death, cursed at the killer's truck. But the next second, the anger on her face froze. It turned out that the so-called Good Samaritan was the killer.
What do you want from me? What do you want from me, son of a bitch?
But the killer didn't respond. He drove away, leaving Nicole Caro alone, crying in agony. Just then, the RV suddenly started. Nicole Caro didn't hesitate. She immediately knocked on the door and slipped inside. It was the RV family. As soon as she met them, she begged them to call the police. But the woman across from her wore a strange smile. And when Nicole Caro questioned them, their answers were completely nonsensical. It was all gibberish. Only then did she realize something was terribly wrong. The woman looked completely insane. The man driving was muttering passages from the Bible, and the two children sat opposite them, staring intently at her. Their eyes were hollow and eerie. Suddenly, a light flickered from the compartment. Nicole Caro instinctively felt that Jess Hiltz must be hidden inside. Ignoring their attempts to restrain her, she rushed over and pulled open the compartment door.
I'm gonna get them! Get her away from me!
This action completely enraged the RV family. Nicole Caro was forced out of the RV. But looking at her surroundings, she was immediately stunned. The RV had clearly been driving for some time, but it had returned to its original spot, as if their drive was just a loop. Nicole Caro returned to the restroom. This time, the messages spanned decades. The content of the messages remained consistently the same, all of them describing being hunted by the killer. But after decades, even if the killer hadn't died, he should have been in his 70s. Yet, judging by his voice and actions, he was clearly a middle-aged man. She walked over to the sink to scrub off the bloodstains on her hands. From the direction of the metal door, a sound suddenly emerged. The sound was faint, carrying a woman's distinctive tremor. Nicole Caro forcefully pried open the metal door. Outside the door, a woman was indeed cowering. By her appearance, she was also one of the killer's victims. The woman, after hearing Nicole Caro's story, was certain that her boyfriend was trapped in the bus. That place was the killer's slaughterhouse. She had endured inhumane torture inside. The woman didn't understand why the killer did this. Every time she asked, he only replied that she deserved it, and her so-called sin was merely stealing $50 from her mother. Wanted to go to a concert. Nicole Caro wanted to ask more questions, but Tracy Kress slowly raised her hand. 2 of her fingers were missing.
God. Oh, God, no, he's back! He's back! He's back!
Nicole Caro peered through the door crack. Sure enough, the killer's pickup truck was parked outside. She frantically dragged a wooden plank and braced it firmly against the door. Seeing that forcing his way in was futile, the killer didn't try to break in again. He started his truck and drove away. Nicole Caro collapsed onto the floor. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, Tracy Kress suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. The crimson liquid instantly spread, quickly covering the entire floor. Nicole Caro, in a panic, rushed to the car's trunk, pulled out a crowbar, hoping to help Tracy Kress escape. But when she rushed back to the restroom, Tracy Kress and the pool of blood had both vanished, as if they had never been there. It was then that she suddenly realized something. She rushed to the phone booth outside. She looked at the missing persons posters, and sure enough, found information about Tracy Kress. It turned out that Tracy Kress had already gone missing back in 1971. But decades had passed. Yet, Tracy Kress showed no signs of aging whatsoever, and she had been on the run for over 10 years. But she could never escape this confined area. Finally, she vanished into thin air right where she was. All of this was likely connected to the killer. Just as Tracy Kress had said earlier, the killer was not human at all, but a demon from hell. Nicole Caro completely broke down. She knew she would eventually die at the hands of the killer. In her moment of despair, the roar of a motorcycle suddenly echoed from outside. Nicole Caro rushed to the window and saw police officer Michael Deacon speeding towards her on a motorcycle. Clutching onto him like a last straw of hope, she immediately ran out and incoherently cried out about everything she had just experienced. Suddenly, the roar of the pickup truck returned from outside. Nicole Caro's face turned pale with fear. She pleaded with him to immediately arrest the killer. The officer told her to stay inside and not move. While he went to confront him, Nicole Caro looked outside and saw the two men exchange a few words. The officer then surprisingly waved his hand, letting the killer drive away. It turned out the officer didn't believe her story at all, and even thought she was crazy. When Nicole Caro confronted him, Officer Michael Deacon just wanted to brush her off. But to their horror, the killer's pickup truck, which had already driven off, suddenly made a sharp U-turn and sped back towards them.
Nicole? Okay.
Nicole Caro immediately rushed out, trying to pull Officer Michael Deacon back into the building. But the killer clearly had no intention of letting them escape. Officer Michael Deacon was struck and instantly knocked unconscious from the pain. Yet, the killer didn't finish him off. Instead, he retrieved a heavy chain from his truck. He fastened one end to Officer Michael Deacon's motorcycle and secured the other end to the back of his pickup. Then he drove away. The motorcycle was dragged across the ground, emitting a horrifying screeching sound. Seizing this brief window of opportunity, Nicole Caro dragged Officer Michael Deacon into the restroom and then wedged a wooden board tightly against the iron door. This time, the killer didn't ram the door. He simply wrapped the chain around the door lock a few times before driving off and vanishing into the night. Nicole Caro used all her strength to pry open a small gap in the door, reaching out to try and undo the chain. But hold on tight, folks, because what happened next was truly disturbing. The agonizing wails stirred Officer Michael Deacon awake. He urged Nicole Caro to retrieve his handgun and fight back. At this moment, a DV was thrown through the window. Inside, it was playing footage of her boyfriend, Jess Hiltz, being tortured by the killer.
If you ever see this, I'm so fucked. I'm sorry. So sorry.
Seeing this scene, Nicole Caro was heartbroken. Immediately after, a can of gasoline was poured through the window. Nicole Caro instantly realized he intended to burn them alive. She had no time for grief. She immediately dragged the police officer trying to escape through the window. But the police officer's injuries were too severe. He couldn't even budge an inch. The police officer, his heart filled with despair, begged Nicole Caro to end his suffering quickly. Nicole Caro, with no other choice, could only raise the gun with trembling hands. After putting the police officer out of his misery, she dared not linger. She scrambled out through the skylight and climbed onto the roof. Nicole Caro narrowly escaped death, not daring to pause for even a second. She plunged into the nearby forest. But the killer quickly spotted her. The killer immediately drove after her. Soon, Nicole Caro disappeared from sight. The killer got out of the truck to look around. Just then, Nicole Caro suddenly jumped out from behind him. She hit him multiple times, until the killer was completely unresponsive. Trembling, she turned the body over. But the moment she saw the face, she completely broke down. Under the hat was unmistakably her boyfriend, Jess Hiltz. His mouth was sewn shut with wire, unable to make a sound. Nicole Caro cried out in heart-wrenching agony. She had killed her own boyfriend, but could only watch helplessly as the real culprit, the killer, drove away in the pickup truck. Besides her hysterical screams, she could do nothing. Returning to the dilapidated rest stop building, Nicole Caro was left with only one thought: revenge. She found matches, an empty liquor bottle, and the remaining gasoline to create a makeshift Molotov cocktail. The next day, she went to the side of the highway, staring intently at the road entrance, waiting for the pickup truck to appear. Before long, the pickup truck arrived as expected. Nicole Caro seized the opportunity. She hurled the Molotov cocktail. After the raging fire burned for over 10 minutes, she finally walked up to check. But the driver's seat was empty. There was no one in sight. She was filled with confusion. Little did she know, danger was already lurking. After an unknown period of time, the phone booth, once covered with missing person posters, now had a new one, and the photo on it was Nicole Caro. One day, a college student came to use the newly renovated public restroom. She suddenly heard faint cries for help coming from the storage room. The college student quickly ran out to call the police. But when the police officer opened the door, it was completely empty inside. He thought the college student was playing a trick on him, and angrily turned to leave.
I really hurt her.
Although the movie has ended, many mysteries still remain unsolved. In fact, from Tracy Kress, the woman who met a tragic end at the beginning, and the deranged RV family, it's clear that all these people were the killer's prey, snatched from unsuspecting travelers. He doesn't directly kill them, but instead imprisons them at the rest stop, tormenting their minds day after day, until they were driven completely insane and lost their sense of self. And this rest stop is more like a separate dimension created by the killer. As long as they were his prey, no one could escape. This is also why the RV drove for a long time, but still ended up circling back to the same spot. And what exactly is the killer? The entire film never reveals, but it's precisely this choice to never show his face, and only present him through his vehicle and weapons. This depersonalized approach makes him even more terrifying than if his identity were clearly defined. And this is also the core of the film's plot. It's not merely a puzzle-solving suspense, but an atmosphere. It's pure suspense. It doesn't aim to provide definitive answers, but instead, through these ambiguous settings, it plunges the audience into an unknown fear. You don't know where the monster comes from, nor how to escape. And this feeling of being out of control is precisely the allure of road horror.